Here's the problem with most teaching on John 15. It turns one of the most intimate, urgent, and emotionally loaded conversations in the entire Bible into a to-do list. Pray more. Read more. Stay connected. Stay in the Word. Don't drift. And all of that is true. But none of it is the point. Because the word Jesus uses in John 15, the word that gets translated as abide in most English Bibles, is one of the most personal, relationally charged words in the Greek language. And when you understand what it actually meant, and when you understand the moment Jesus chose to say it, the whole passage stops being a spiritual productivity guide and becomes something completely different. It becomes a love declaration from a man who knows he is about to die. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand John 15 in a way that most people who've been in church their whole lives have never heard. And before we get into any of that, here's what I want you to do right now. Think of the person in your life who has most consistently shown you what it looks like to be genuinely close to God. Not the most theologically informed person, not the most disciplined, the person whose faith clearly comes from somewhere real, somewhere deep, rather than from religious performance. Hold that person in mind, because by the end of this video, I think you'll understand exactly what it is they have that produces that quality of life. And it's not what most teaching on spiritual growth would lead you to expect. Let's start before verse 1, because if you don't understand when this conversation happened, you'll miss everything. John 15 is not a sermon delivered to crowds. It's not a teaching given on a hillside to thousands of people. It's not even a synagogue address. It's a private conversation. The night of Jesus' arrest, the last night of his life before the crucifixion, he gathers his 11 closest disciples in an upper room. Judas has already left to betray him. The others don't fully understand what's coming. Jesus has just washed their feet. He has just told them that one of them would betray him. He has just told Peter that Peter would deny him 3 times before morning. The mood in that room is not peaceful. It's bewildered. It's heavy. It's the feeling of standing at the edge of something you can sense but can't see. And into that room, into that specific night, Jesus speaks John 15. He doesn't say, here is a 5-step framework for spiritual growth. He says, I am the vine. You are the branches. Abide in me. This matters enormously. Because when you know he's about to leave them, physically, suddenly, violently, the command to abide takes on a weight it simply cannot carry if you read it as advice for a comfortable Tuesday morning. He's telling people who are about to lose him, stay connected to me, not to a program, not to a religious system, to me. Even after I'm gone, even when you can't see me, even when it makes no sense, stay. That's the emotional ground of this passage. And we can't understand what abiding means until we feel the gravity of the moment it was spoken into. Now, the vine image itself. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. In English, that reads as a nice metaphor, a pleasant agricultural image, something you might see on a rustic wall hanging at a Christian bookstore. But for every Jewish person in that upper room, this image was loaded because the vine was Israel's national symbol. It was the image of God's chosen people going all the way back to the Psalms and the prophets. Psalm 80 verse 8, you transplanted a vine from Egypt. You drove out the nations and planted it. Isaiah 5, God plants a vine, tends it carefully, expects fruit. The vine produces sour grapes instead. God tears it down. Ezekiel 15, Ezekiel 19, Hosea 10, Jeremiah 2. Again and again, the vine appears in the prophets as the image of Israel's failure, the vine that was supposed to produce fruit for the world and didn't. So when Jesus says, I am the true vine, he is making a claim that would have been immediately, unmistakably clear to everyone in that room. He is saying, I am what Israel was supposed to be. I am the genuine article. the one who actually produces what God planted a people to produce. Not a replacement for Israel, a fulfillment of what Israel pointed toward. And then, you are the branches, not servants, not students, not followers at a respectful distance. Branches. A branch is not separate from the vine. It is not adjacent to the vine. It is a direct extension of the vine, sharing the same root system, carrying the same sap, living off the same source of life. There is no meaningful distinction between where the vine ends and the branch begins. This is the intimacy Jesus is describing, not a relationship between two separate parties who communicate occasionally. A shared life, a shared source. One organism expressing itself in two forms. That is what abiding is supposed to look like. And here's the thing that makes Menō even more significant. It's not just how often John uses it, it's how he uses it. Watch what Jesus says in John 15, verse 4. Abide in me, and I in you. The relationship goes both directions. Jesus abides in the believer. The believer abides in Jesus, both described using the same word. This is radical because it means the abiding is not one-sided. It's not you maintaining a spiritual discipline while God waits at a distance to see how you do. Jesus says, I abide in you. I remain in you. I hold my position inside you the same way I'm asking you to hold your position inside me. The relationship is mutual. The indwelling is mutual. The staying is mutual, which means, and this is the part that should genuinely undo you, when you feel like you've drifted, when you feel distant, when the connection seems thin or broken or barely there, Jesus is still abiding in you. He hasn't left. The branch can wither. The sap can slow. The fruit can stop. But the vine doesn't abandon the branch because the branch stopped producing. The gardener comes, assesses, prunes, but the vine keeps offering life. The sap keeps being available. The connection keeps being real. Abiding in both directions is the ground state of the relationship. The question is not whether the connection exists. The question is whether you're drawing from it. Now let's go to the word itself, because this is where almost every piece of teaching on John 15 falls short. The Greek word translated abide or remain in some modern translations, this Menō, M-E-N-O, and it is not a casual word. Menō appears over 40 times in the Gospel of John alone, not scattered evenly across the book, concentrated. John uses it more than any other word except the basic grammatical particles of the Greek language. It is one of his signature words. The word he reaches for when he wants to describe the deepest possible form of connection. In classical Greek, Menō carried the idea of staying put when there was pressure to leave. It was used of soldiers holding their position in battle, of a ship riding out a storm in harbor rather than being driven out to sea, of someone remaining in a city under siege rather than fleeing. It is not a passive word. It is a word for active, intentional, costly, staying in the face of forces that are pulling you away. And John uses it to describe both directions of the relationship, Jesus abiding in the Father abiding in the Son, the Spirit abiding in believers, and believers abiding in Jesus. The same word, the same depth of connection, going in every direction. When Jesus says, abide in me and I in you, he is not describing a casual check-in relationship. He is describing mutual indwelling, the same kind of penetrating, active, resistant to separation presence that characterizes his own relationship with the Father, extended now to the disciples and to everyone who comes after them. This is why the phone charger analogy, while helpful, ultimately sells it short. A phone doesn't want to stay connected to its charger. It doesn't choose to. It doesn't resist the pull away from the charger. You do. Abiding is not passive maintenance. It is active, daily, sometimes costly, choosing to remain in someone who you cannot physically see, and who the world around you is constantly giving you reasons to drift away from. Now let's talk about the part of John 15 that almost nobody teaches on directly, because it's the part that changes everything. And it's the part that most comfortable versions of this passage quietly skip. Verse 2. Right there in the opening. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. Okay. Most teaching gets to that verse and moves quickly past it, or addresses it briefly as a warning, and then rushes to the more encouraging material. But look at what comes right after. Still verse 2. While every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. Did you catch that? The branches that bear no fruit get cut off. Yes, but the branches that do bear fruit, those get pruned, both, cut and pruned. The branch that is connected, faithful, producing fruit, that branch still gets pruned. This is the word Jesus deliberately uses before he says, "Abide in me," before he gives the command. He establishes the context first, and the context is this. The Father is active in your life not as a passive observer, but as a gardener, a vine dresser, someone who walks through the vineyard with a blade. The Greek word for prunes here is katharize, from the root katharos, meaning clean or pure. It's where we get the word catharsis. It carries the sense of removing what doesn't belong so that what remains can flourish. In ancient vine dressing, pruning was not gentle trimming, it was severe. A skilled vine dresser would cut back a vine to a fraction of its growth from the previous season, sometimes cutting it back so dramatically that to an untrained eye, it looked like the vine had been destroyed. And then spring would come, and the vine would produce more fruit than it ever could have without the cutting. So here's the question. John 15 is actually asking, and it's a much harder question than, are you staying connected? Are you willing to be pruned? Are you willing to trust the gardener's work even when the blade comes out? Even when what gets cut away is something you valued, something you thought was bearing fruit, something that from where you're standing looks like loss rather than preparation for something greater? This is why Jesus says it before the command to abide. Because genuine abiding, the kind that holds under pressure, the kind that Menō points toward, requires you to trust the gardener's judgment about what needs to go. If your abiding is only comfortable when God is adding to your life, when things are going well, when prayers are being answered, when you feel his presence clearly, then you're not actually abiding in the vine. You're enjoying the sunshine. You're enjoying the sunshine. Real abiding holds through the pruning. And here is the specific thing most people miss about the pruning. Jesus is speaking this passage in real time the night before his death. He is about to be arrested. He's about to be tried in a mock court. He's about to be beaten beyond recognition. He's about to be crucified. He knows all of this. And what he says in this moment, on this night, is the Father prunes the fruitful branches. In other words, what is about to happen to me, this violent, humiliating, physically catastrophic sequence of events, is the gardener's pruning at work in the life of the true vine. The cross is not a defeat. It is the most severe and most purposeful pruning in history. And the fruit? 3 days later, an empty tomb. 50 days later, a spirit poured out on 120 people in an upper room who then turned the Roman Empire upside down. The pruning produced fruit that is still growing 2,000 years later. So when Jesus says the fruitful branches get pruned, he is not giving you a comforting theology of suffering to make hard times easier to tolerate. He is pointing to himself as the proof that the gardener's most severe work produces the most lasting fruit. And he is asking you to trust the same gardener with your own seasons of cutting. Now let's slow down on the most confrontational line in the entire passage, because it gets quoted quickly and absorbed too easily. Verse 5, the end of it. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Nothing. Not a little. Not less than you could with me. Not your efforts will be less effective without my support. Nothing. In Greek, the word is auden, an absolute zero, not a relative nothing, a categorical nothing, the absence of any genuine spiritual production whatsoever. And this is where the passage becomes genuinely countercultural in a way that the church in most of the Western world has been slow to reckon with. Because we live in a culture that is built on the assumption that motivated, disciplined, talented people can produce meaningful results through sustained effort. Work hard, be strategic, optimize your habits, build your systems, execute with excellence. And all of that is real. In the physical world, in business, in education, in most domains of human achievement, effort and skill and strategy produce results. But Jesus is not talking about those domains. He is talking about fruit, his specific word, the kind of spiritual production that has eternal weight, that outlasts you, that changes the nature of the people it touches. That reflects something of God's character into the world. That fruit, that specific kind, cannot be produced apart from him. It's harder to produce it apart from him. It cannot be produced at all. You can build an impressive ministry apart from him. You can establish an influential platform apart from him. You can create content that reaches millions of people apart from him. You can run a church efficiently, professionally, with excellent production values apart from him. And it can produce exactly nothing in the specific currency Jesus is talking about. This is the uncomfortable reality that the vine and branch's image is designed to make impossible to escape. A branch that is severed from the vine looks fine for a while. It has the color, the shape, the structure. But it is not producing anything new. It is coasting on what was already in it when it was cut. And eventually, the cut branch reveals itself. The fruit doesn't come. The leaves yellow. The whole thing withers. Jesus says, I want more for you than a withering branch that looks alive. I want fruit that lasts, joy that's full, love that flows. And the only way to those things runs through total, ongoing, moment-by-moment dependence on me, not as a spiritual discipline to achieve, as a reality to acknowledge. Now, there is a dimension of John 15 that most teaching on abiding completely disconnects from the rest of the passage, treating it as a separate instruction rather than the natural outward extension of everything that came before. Verse 12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. This is not a new subject. This is what abiding produces when it flows outward into community. Because the branch that is genuinely connected to the vine doesn't just produce fruit in isolation. The life that flows through one branch overflows into the branches beside it. And Jesus doesn't say, love one another as best you can. He says, as I have loved you, as I have loved you. That is the measure, the impossible, entirely specific, entirely personal standard. How has he loved them? He's about to show them the next day on a cross. Verse 13, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. He's not speaking abstractly. He is describing what he is about to do and telling them what the love he's asking them to imitate looks like in its fullest expression. Lay down your life, not be nice when it's convenient. Not be patient when the social cost is low. Not manage other people's emotions when you have energy left over. The model is self-sacrifice. The willingness to give up what you value, your comfort, your reputation, your preferences, eventually your safety, for the people you are in relationship with. This is the outward direction of abiding. The inward reality, you remaining in Jesus, Jesus remaining in you, becomes the outward practice of loving others with the same quality of love that flows to you from the vine. You can't produce this by trying. An unconnected branch can't manufacture it. A person grinding at Christian performance rather than genuinely drawing from the vine will eventually hit the limit of what self-effort can produce. And self-sacrifice sits well beyond that limit. But a branch genuinely connected, a person who has settled into the love they were commanded to abide in, has access to a quality of love that is not generated internally. It flows through. The same way sap doesn't originate in the branch. It flows from the root, through the vine, through the branch, into the fruit. Love that genuinely costs flows the same way. You don't manufacture it. You remain in its source, and it flows. Now let's look at what abiding actually produces, because this is the part of John 15 that most people genuinely do want. They just don't realize that the path to it runs through everything we've already covered. Verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. Fruit, not comfort, not a feeling of spiritual health, not having your prayers answered, not a sense of closeness to God. Fruit. The word in Greek is karpos, and it appears in verse 16 in a form that changes how you read all the other fruit language in the passage. Verse 16, I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. Fruit that will last. In Greek, karpos men, the same root as abide, Menō, applied now to the fruit itself. The fruit of genuine abiding is not temporary. It has the quality of permanence. It outlasts the moment of its production. It continues beyond your individual life. So what is this fruit? Jesus gives us several layers in John 15 itself. The most obvious, transformed character. The kind of love, patience, resilience, and selflessness that can only come from being genuinely connected to the source of those things, not produced by effort, genuinely grown. The way grapes don't grow because a branch tries hard. They grow because the sap is flowing, but there's more. Verse 7, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. Prayer that changes things, not prayer as a spiritual discipline to maintain. Prayer as the natural overflow of a relationship. The way you talk to someone you're genuinely close to about things you genuinely care about in ways that are genuinely aligned with who they are. When your words and Jesus' words are occupying the same space, when his priorities have genuinely shaped the way you see the world, then what you ask for is not random. It's not self-serving. It reflects his heart, and so it gets answered. And verse 8, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Fruit that is visible to others. Fruit that reveals something about God. Fruit that makes people ask questions, not about you, but about the source you're connected to. This is the fullness of what abiding produces, not private spiritual wellness. A life that becomes, through its very ordinariness, evidence of something extraordinary. Now let's be specific about what abiding actually looks like. Not as a list of disciplines, but as a description of a particular posture toward life. Because here's the thing that the Stay Connected teaching tends to miss. You can do all the right activities and still not be abiding, and you can have very few formal spiritual disciplines and still be deeply, genuinely abiding. The difference is not what you do, it's where your weight is resting. Jesus gives us the clearest practical definition in verse 7. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you. Two things moving simultaneously. You abiding in Jesus, his words abiding in you. That second part is important. The words of Jesus are not just content to be consumed. They are a presence that takes up residence. They occupy space. They shape the way you interpret what's happening around you. They interrupt your automatic reactions. They provide alternative framings when your instincts would pull you toward anxiety or resentment or despair. When Jesus' words are genuinely abiding in you, not just stored in your memory but active in your thinking, you don't experience life the same way. The anxious moment hits, and somewhere in the background, do not let your hearts be troubled surfaces, not as a command to suppress the emotion, as a reminder that there is a frame larger than the fear. The relational conflict surfaces, and love one another as I have loved you is not just a nice idea. It's a live instruction that challenges your instinct to protect yourself. The temptation to drift surfaces, and the words don't let you drift in peace. They pull you back. That's what his words abiding in you looks like in practice. Not a Bible reading habit, though that matters. A genuine saturation of your inner life with the way Jesus sees things. So much so that his perspective becomes your instinctive starting point, rather than something you have to work to remember. And then there is this, verse 9. One of the most quietly devastating verses in the entire passage. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. Abide in my love. Not. Abide in the discipline of loving me back. Not. Abide in the practice of Christian living. Not even. Abide in the experience of my love. Abide in the love itself. Remain in it. Hold your position inside it. Let it be the atmosphere you live in rather than something you occasionally visit. Here's why this matters more than most people realize. The Father's love for the Son is the greatest, most complete, most uninterrupted love in the universe. It is the love that existed before the foundation of the world. The love Jesus speaks of in John 17. You loved me before the creation of the world. And Jesus says, that love, that specific, eternal, oceanic, uninterrupted love, is the same love I have for you. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Not a similar love, not love of the same general type, the same love extended. And the command is not, try hard to feel that love, or work to deserve that love, or perform spiritual disciplines to access that love. The command is, abide in it, remain inside it, stop leaving. Because the problem for most believers is not that they're unloved, it's that they keep leaving. They forget. They drift back into the default assumption that their relationship with God is performance-based, that his love is something to be earned, maintained, and potentially lost based on how well this week has gone. And Jesus says, stop leaving that truth. Stay in it. Every morning when you wake up, every time the shame tries to pull you out, every time the anxiety whispers that you're not enough, stay in the love. That is abiding in his love. Now, let's talk about the strange and counterintuitive gift that comes after this, because it's the one that most people forget is even in this passage. Verse 11. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. My joy in you. Not that you might achieve spiritual contentment, not that your emotional state might improve. My joy, Jesus' own joy, present in you, filling you. This is worth stopping on. Jesus is speaking this on the night of his arrest. He knows what's coming. He knows the betrayal, the false trials, the beating, the cross. And he says, I want my joy to be in you. What is his joy? The joy of a person who knows exactly where he came from, exactly who he belongs to, and exactly where he's going. A joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, that doesn't evaporate under pressure. That can look at the cross and see through to the resurrection. Hebrews 12, verse 2. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. He went to the cross with joy, not because the cross was pleasant, because the joy he carried was larger than the suffering. And he says, that joy, that specific circumstances immune, rooted in the Father's love joy, I want it to be in you, and I want it to be full. This is the end state of abiding. Not peace, though peace comes. Not answered prayer, though that comes too. Joy. The full measure, Jesus' own quality joy that makes you capable of facing things that by every natural measure should break you. This is what the vine produces in the branch when the connection is genuine. Not a better version of the life you're already trying to manage. A quality of inner life that you could not manufacture, perform, or discipline yourself into. Only grown, only received, only possible when you stay connected. Now here's the part of John 15 that comfortable, encouraging teaching quietly leaves out. Verses 18 through 21. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. After everything Jesus has said about love and abiding and joy and fruit, he shifts, suddenly, without apology, because genuine abiding has a cost, and he wants them to know it before they experience it. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. This is not incidental. This is the logical consequence of everything that came before. When you genuinely abide, when the life of Jesus actually flows through you and begins producing visible fruit, that fruit looks different from what the world produces. Different values, different responses to power, different ways of treating people who have nothing to offer you in return, different uses of money and platform and influence, and different creates friction. The person genuinely abiding doesn't fully fit the patterns around them. They don't belong entirely to the normal social dynamics of self-advancement and status and image management. And that difference, in sustained relationship with people who don't share it, will be noticed. Sometimes resented. Sometimes actively opposed. Jesus doesn't tell them this so they'll prepare for persecution. He tells them so that when the friction comes, they don't interpret it as evidence that something went wrong. The world's resistance is not a sign of failure. It is, in a strange and uncomfortable way, evidence that the fruit is real enough to be visible, that the abiding is genuine enough to create difference. But he doesn't leave them to face that alone. Verse 26. When the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. The Helper. In Greek, parakletos, literally the one called alongside, the one present in the moment of need. He is sending them a presence that will make abiding possible after he is physically gone. A spirit who will keep the connection open, keep the sap flowing, keep the love available even when the world makes it costly to express it. This is the full scope of John 15, not a self-improvement system. A description of a life, costly, fruitful, joyful, persecuted, and loved, that flows from genuine connection to a vine that never runs dry. And now, the verse that most teaching on John 15 rushes past. The one that might be the most personally significant thing Jesus says in this entire passage. Verse 15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. Friends, not servants, not followers, not disciples in the formal hierarchical sense, not members of a religious institution. Friends. And he explains why the distinction matters. A servant doesn't know what the master is doing or why. A servant receives orders and executes them. A servant's relationship with the master is functional, defined by task and role rather than by knowledge and shared life. A friend is different. A friend knows. A friend is led into the reasoning. A friend has access to the inside conversation. And Jesus says, everything I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Everything. The inner logic of the kingdom. The way the Father thinks about love and loss and power and death. The reason the cross is happening. The way the grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies in order to bear much fruit, which is the verse right before chapter 15, chapter 12, verse 24. He has made all of it known to them, not held it back, not managed the information, opened it up, and he is calling this friendship. Now, here's why this matters so much for how you understand the command to abide. Most people approach the relationship with God as servants, which makes sense. He is God. The gap is infinite. The appropriate response is deference. But Jesus says, I have a different category for you. I have moved you without you asking, without you earning it. from servant to friend, and friendship changes the posture of the relationship. A servant abides because obedience demands it. A friend abides because the relationship draws them. A servant stays connected because the rules require it. A friend stays connected because they want to, because the relationship is genuinely valuable, genuinely sustaining, genuinely the source of the best things in their life. The command to abide is not being issued to servants. It's being extended to friends. People who know what the master knows. People who understand why this matters. People who have been made aware of the inside conversation and are now being invited to stay in it. When you read "Abide in me" as a command issued to a servant by a master, it carries the weight of obligation. When you read it as an invitation from a friend to a friend, it carries the weight of longing. Jesus is not commanding duty here. He is expressing desire. Stay. Not because you have to, because I want you here. Because this is where your life is. Because the fruit that matters only grows here. Because the joy I want you to have is only available here. Because the love I need you to carry into the world only flows from here. Stay. So let's land this practically. Because understanding is not the same as living it. What does a life genuinely shaped by John 15 look like on an ordinary day? It looks like someone who starts the morning by acknowledging dependence rather than launching into agenda. Not a long performance, not a ritual. A genuine, brief, honest acknowledgement. I am a branch. The life I need today is not in me. I'm staying connected. It looks like someone who encounters pruning without immediately trying to escape it. When something is taken, a relationship, an opportunity, a sense of certainty that turned out to be false, someone genuinely abiding doesn't just grieve. They ask, is this the gardener at work? Is this cutting for a purpose? What is this making room for? It looks like someone who prays differently, not reciting requests at a God who might or might not be listening. Talking genuinely, specifically, to someone they're in ongoing contact with. Asking for what they actually need in ways that reflect what they actually believe about who they're asking. It looks like someone whose love for the people around them occasionally surprises even themselves. Who does or says something generous or patient they didn't plan, and realizes it wasn't entirely them. It flowed. It looks like someone who doesn't run from the world or the friction it creates, but who also isn't destroyed by it. Who can absorb hostility without returning it? Not because they're naturally that patient, because they're drawing on something that replenishes. And it looks like someone who carries, underneath whatever is happening on the surface, a quality of joy that doesn't make complete sense given their circumstances. Not optimism, not mood, not a coping mechanism. Specifically the joy Jesus said he wanted to be in them. Full, present, stable, not contingent on circumstances. Because the vine is real, the gardener is working. The fruit that matters will last. And the love that initiated all of this, that chose you before you responded, that abides in you even when you forget to draw on it, is not going anywhere. Now I want to close with the thing that makes this passage genuinely urgent, not just important. Urgent. Verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you. You did not choose me. I chose you. Set aside the theological debate about election for a moment, because regardless of where you land on that, the emotional and relational meaning of this statement is the same. Jesus is saying, this relationship did not originate with you. I initiated this. I moved toward you first. I invested in you first. I knew what you were, and I chose you anyway. This matters for abiding because of one of the deepest reasons people don't abide. One of the deepest reasons they drift, they disconnect, they keep leaving the love they were commanded to stay in, is that they're not sure they're wanted. They believe God tolerates them. They believe God has uses for them. They believe God will eventually accept them when they've done enough to earn it, and so they approach the relationship tentatively, performing, trying to make themselves welcome in a space where they're already home. Jesus says, you did not choose me. I chose you. The welcome is not something you earned. It's the precondition of the relationship, the foundation under everything, the ground you're standing on, whether you acknowledge it or not. And because I chose you, because this was my initiative, my investment, my love that moved first, abide. Remain. Don't keep walking out the door of a house you've been given. Don't keep offering to earn what you've already been handed. Stay. Produce fruit that lasts. Ask in my name. Love each other the way I loved you, and let the joy, my joy, fill you. Here's the practical difference between the two versions. The servant who reads, "You did not choose me," as theological content thinks, interesting doctrine, stores it, moves on. The friend who receives, "You did not choose me," as relational reality thinks, he wanted me here. Before I did anything, before I knew what I was doing, he wanted me here. And that shifts everything about how they approach the relationship. The servant performs. The friend rests. The servant manages their spiritual standing. The friend draws on a love they didn't earn. The servant is afraid of the pruning. The friend, slowly, imperfectly, over years of learning, comes to trust the gardener. And the fruit? You can see the difference. Not because the friend is trying harder, because the connection is real. This is why John 15 is not a passage about what you need to do differently. It's a passage about what you need to stop doing. Stop striving to produce fruit on your own. Stop managing a relationship that's already been secured for you. Stop leaving the love you've been commanded to stay in. Stop treating as a servant's obligation what was given to you as a friend's inheritance. The vine is real. The life is available. The gardener knows what he's doing. And the invitation, spoken on the last night, in the heaviest room by the person who loved those 11 people with everything he had, is still extended. Abide. Stay. Not because it's required, because this is where your life is. Abiding is not a discipline, it's a response to being loved first, chosen first, welcomed first, by someone who knew everything about you and didn't change his mind. The vine doesn't need the branch to try harder, it needs the branch to stay. And here's the thing that should break every anxious, striving, exhausted Christian wide open. The life Jesus is describing in John 15 is not a higher level you eventually get to if you're disciplined enough. It is the normal Christian life, not the advanced version for mature believers who have their act together, the foundational, available to everyone, meant from the beginning reality of what it means to follow Jesus. Branches, connected to a vine, tended by a gardener who prunes precisely because he wants more from you, not less. Fruit that lasts. Joy that's full. A love you didn't earn and can't lose. That is what it means to abide in Christ. If this gave you something you've been missing, share it with someone who needs it. We'll see you in the next one.